The Mafia man expected an escort, but a desperate mother walked into the room instead. The elevator hissed open like a secret I was never meant to hear. My heels echoed across the marble like an accusation, and every step into the cathedral of glass and steel that was Greco and Associati felt like I was trespassing in a world that didn't want me. Everything smelled of power, cold cologne, expensive ink, fear dressed in silk. They looked at me like I didn't belong. Maybe I didn't, but I walked in anyway, spine straight, mouth silent, holding my resume like a lifeline I was already losing grip on. I saw him before he saw me, Niccolò Greco, leaning back in his office like he owned not just the company, but gravity itself. His fingers, long and cruel, turned a pen over and over, eyes half-lidded, lips parted in quiet thought, a storm in a suit. My lungs forgot how to breathe, and when his gaze lifted, calm, merciless, it passed over me like a verdict. I wasn't ready for the weight of it. No one warned me that a man could look at you like that. Not with lust. Not yet. With curiosity sharpened to a blade, like I was a puzzle he didn't ask for but would not rest until he solved. I looked away first. That felt like a defeat. The rest of the day passed in a blur of whispered protocols and tight-lipped coworkers. They handed me files like explosives and watched me walk as if I might detonate. I smiled through it. I always smile. My mouth has learned to lie better than my eyes ever could. By 5, I was back in my apartment, the windows cracked to let out the ghost of hope. Nico's paperwork was waiting on the table. A fresh envelope from the hospital with bold red letters, urgent. The surgery, his only chance, was being rescheduled, forwarded. That meant faster. That meant I didn't have time, I didn't have money, and I no longer had choices. The knock came soft. Katerina didn't wait for me to invite her in. She never did. She smelled like nightclubs and resilience. "You need cash," she said without ceremony. "Real money. Now." I nodded. Silence is safer than pride. She sat beside me, legs crossed like a siren in a boardroom. "I have a name, a contact. You won't have to do much. Just one night. One event. You show up, you smile, you drink the champagne, and you leave. You don't even have to go upstairs." I laughed, but it came out broken. That's what they always say. Her hand closed over mine, warm, steady. "It's not forever. It's just a way out. And you're drowning, G. I can see it." I didn't answer. I looked at the picture on the fridge, Nico's kindergarten drawing of the two of us holding hands, beneath a sun with too many rays. He'd drawn my smile too big. He didn't know better. He still believed I could fix things. "I'll think about it," I whispered. "You don't have time to think," she said, "only to survive." That night, I opened the email from the agency. The subject line was a bullet. Confirmed. One client, one event, Hotel Excelsior, 8 p.m. The dress arrived in a garment bag like a dare. Black silk, deep neckline. No back, no room for fear. I dressed like a woman I wasn't. Painted lips I didn't recognize. Looked at my reflection and tried to find the mother beneath the mask. I failed. The car came at 7:30. The driver didn't speak. Just opened the door and drove me to the place where everything would begin to end. The ballroom was gold and shadows. Champagne flutes danced under crystal chandeliers, and the air pulsed with money. I stepped inside, heart thudding behind my ribs like it wanted to run. Then I saw him, Niccolò, leaning against the bar, untouchable in black. He turned, and our eyes locked. He didn't flinch. He smiled, slowly, like he knew I'd come, like he'd ordered me himself. My throat went dry. He walked toward me, slow and smooth, as if he were stalking something fragile. His voice, when it came, was velvet and venom. "Didn't expect to see you here, Miss Romano." "I could say the same," I said, trying not to tremble. "You work for me," he said, eyes burning with something I couldn't read. "And now you're here, dressed like that, pretending not to know me. How curious." "I'm not pretending anything," I replied. "I'm just filling a role." He laughed, low and deliberate. "Are you? Or are you discovering a side of yourself that was always waiting?" I wanted to slap him. I wanted to kiss him. I wanted to run. Instead, I drank the champagne. The night stretched like a wire between us, thin and tense. Every time he passed near me, the room disappeared. He didn't touch me. He didn't need to. His gaze pressed against my skin like a hand. As the gala ended, he found me near the elevator, alone. "I'll pay you 100,000 euros, he said, voice low enough to melt. I looked up at him, heart hammering. For what? One night. No questions. No lies. I should have said yes. I needed to say yes. But something inside me, something stubborn and broken, pulled me back. "No," I whispered. He stared at me like I'd rewritten a rule no one was allowed to change. And then I walked away. Not because I was strong, but because I was breaking, and I didn't want him to see me fall. I couldn't sleep. Not because I wasn't tired. I was. Exhausted in a way that made my bones ache and my skin feel too tight. But something about the way he looked at me, that smug, slow smile, like I was a secret he already owned, it wouldn't leave me. It burned behind my eyes, even with the lights off, even after I washed my face and peeled away the dress and the makeup and the persona I wore like armor. I lay in bed with the city humming outside the window and my body still trembling from the way his voice wrapped around my name, Miss Romano. It never sounded like that before. I wanted to forget him. I wanted to forget the taste of wanting something I had no right to want. But want doesn't listen to reason. Desire is a traitor. It slips under your skin and whispers things your pride can't drown. When the sun rose, it brought no peace, just reality. Sharp, cold, cruel. I dressed quickly, not thinking about the bruised heat he left in my mind. Just work. Just the job. Just breathe. The office was a mirror of the night before. Polished, merciless, silent. No one looked at me, but I felt their eyes anyway. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe not. My heels clicked too loudly down the hall. My blouse was too thin. My heart beat like I was walking into the wrong room again. But I made it through the morning, until the phone rang. The hospital. I knew that voice. Dr. Esposito, calm as ever. But today he didn't ask how I was. Today, he didn't wait. "We've had a cancellation," he said. "A surgical slot opened up, but we'll need to confirm by end of day. And payment, how much?" I breathed. He told me. I felt the world tilt. My hand tightened around the receiver like I could crush the number out of existence. I can't. "You said you wanted the soonest possible," he said. "This is it. I'm sorry. We have to move fast." I hung up. I didn't cry. Not then. I went to the bathroom, locked the door, pressed my forehead to the cold glass of the mirror, and I whispered the truth out loud. "You don't have a choice." The word sounded like a confession. He was still in his office when I knocked. Of course he was. Niccolò Greco never disappeared when you needed him to. He looked up slowly, the pen still between his fingers, like I was nothing more than an expected interruption. His eyes didn't widen. They narrowed, with curiosity or anticipation. I didn't know which was worse. "Miss Romano," he said smoothly. "Twice in one day. Should I be flattered?" "I need to speak with you," I said, quieter than I meant. He nodded toward the door. "Shut it." I did. He stood, came around the desk, leaned back against it like a king waiting for a subject to beg. I hated how perfect he looked. Pressed, calm, that trace of something darker behind his eyes, coiled like a serpent watching its prey hesitate. "I changed my mind," I said. His head tilted slightly. "About?" "The offer." There was silence, a long, dangerous pause. I felt it stretch between us like a fuse. "I see," he said at last. "So, now you want the 100,000. I couldn't speak. I nodded. He watched me too closely. His gaze didn't touch my skin. It peeled it back. "Why now?" "I need it," I said. "For your son," he murmured, voice like silk dragged across glass. I blinked. "You knew?" "I observe," he said. "I don't ask, but I listen." I hated him. And I hated how a part of me didn't. "When?" he asked. "Tonight." Another pause. Then, "My car will be waiting. 9 o'clock. I nodded, turned, reached for the handle. "Julia?" The way he said my name, bare, unadorned, not Miss Romano, it made my spine straighten. "Yes?" "No games tonight," he said. "I don't like pretending." I swallowed. "Neither do I." That night, I didn't wear the agency's dress. I wore something of my own, black, simple, clean. I didn't want to look like someone else. I wanted to look like me. Because if I was going to sell a part of myself, I needed to know which part I was losing. The car came again. Same driver. Same silence. But this time, I didn't tremble. Not on the outside. When I entered the penthouse suite, he was there, waiting. No tie, no jacket. Just shirt sleeves rolled up and a drink in his hand, like this was nothing. He didn't speak. I walked toward him slowly. Every step felt like a fall. When he reached for me, his hands were careful. Too careful. Like he knew he was touching something breakable. Like he didn't want to admit how badly he wanted to break it anyway. We didn't speak. He undressed me like a man who'd already imagined it too many times to need words. And I let him, because I needed the money. But more than that, because I needed to feel something other than fear. The night was quiet, not gentle, not violent, just inevitable. And when I left before sunrise, the money tucked inside my purse, I didn't look back. because I couldn't risk seeing something in his eyes that would make me stay. The hospital smelled like bleach and grief, like hope watered down and left too long in the sun. I sat in the plastic chair outside Nico's room, the envelope pressed flat against my lap like a secret I didn't want to open. Inside it, his future maybe. A price paid in flesh and silence. The nurse walked by, smiled like she understood too much, and I wanted to vanish into the linoleum. They told me he was strong. They always said that. He's a fighter, as if that meant anything when cancer didn't care. But he was sleeping peacefully now, unaware that his mother had sold her soul so he could have another chance to live. I watched his chest rise and fall, fragile and sure, and for a moment, I felt something like pride or shame. They looked the same on days like this. When the doctor confirmed the payment had cleared, he didn't ask how I'd done it, just nodded like it didn't matter. But it did. God, it did. I left the hospital with my body aching like it had been bruised from the inside. Not from his hands. Niccolo hadn't been cruel. He hadn't even been rough. No, he'd been careful. But it was the kind of careful that burns, the kind that lingers in your skin like a fingerprint no one else can see. His silence had been louder than words, and I hated how much of me still heard it. The office didn't feel like a safe place anymore. Not that it ever had. But now it felt exposed, like he could see through walls, through clothes, through every fragile mask I tried to wear. He didn't speak to me when I returned, didn't even glance my way, but I felt him. Every time I moved, every breath I took, it was like he was in the room, just beneath the surface of the air. I tried to focus, tried to forget, but forgetting requires distance, and Niccolo Greco was not a man who allowed that. On Wednesday, he passed behind me as I stood at the copier, said nothing, didn't stop, but the scent of his cologne hit me like a whisper down my spine. My fingers slipped, dropped the papers. By the time I crouched to gather them, he was gone. On Thursday, I found an envelope on my desk. No name, no note, just a single plane ticket. Venice, round trip, first class. My name printed in clean, sharp letters. I tore it in half before anyone could see, and I hated how my hands trembled while I did it. By Friday, I'd memorized the rhythm of his footsteps. I could tell when he was in the building just by the way the air changed, and I knew, deep in the part of me I wished I could kill, that he was waiting, testing, pushing. That afternoon, he called me into his office. No explanation, no task, just a look. I stepped in, closed the door. His back was to me, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a glass of something dark and expensive. He didn't speak for several breaths. Then, "You've been avoiding me." I didn't answer. My throat was too dry to be brave. He turned, slowly, eyes burning gold in the low light. "Why?" "You know why," I said, barely more than a breath. "I paid you," he said, like it was fact, not weapon. "We had a deal." I flinched. "And it's over." He crossed the room in 2 strides, too close, too much. His voice dropped, low and intimate. "But I'm not done with you." My heart kicked against my ribs. "You don't get to decide that." "I do when I've tasted you," he murmured. "When you walked into my world like a dare and left before I could finish unwrapping the mystery." I swallowed hard. "I'm not a mystery. I'm not a game." "No," he said. "You're a fire, and I want to burn." His hand lifted, fingers brushing my jaw with maddening restraint. "Name your price, Julia. Whatever you want." "I'll double it." I slapped him. The sound cracked through the room like thunder. His cheek turned, slow and red, but he didn't react. Just stared at me, stunned, as if I'd become something holy. I stepped back, shaking. "I quit." His mouth parted slightly. "You what?" "I quit," I repeated. "This, whatever this is, isn't power. It's poison, and I'm done drinking it." I turned before he could speak again, heart pounding so violently it felt like it would crack my ribs open. But as I reached the door, I heard him whisper, "You'll be back." And I knew. I might, but not for the reasons he believed. Not for money, not for pride. I would return only when I could stand in front of him without flinching, when the fire in me stopped asking to be fed by the dark in him. I didn't cry until I was alone. Not in his office, not in front of those burning eyes. I held myself together like a sculpture made of glass, thin and gleaming and seconds from shattering. But the moment I stepped into the elevator, I felt the first crack, and by the time I reached the street, the fracture split wide open. The tears came fast, hot, silent. No sobs, just a flood, like my body was trying to rinse him out of me, and failing. I walked without knowing where, feet moving, heart numb, thoughts looping in that cold, poisonous echo. "You'll be back." As if he knew me better than I did, as if he'd already written the next page of my story and dared me to change it. I wanted to hate him. I needed to. But hate requires distance. And he was still under my skin, like ink soaked too deep into paper. That night, Nico slept peacefully beside me in the hospital bed. His little fingers curled around mine like an anchor. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, reminding me of why I did what I did, why I gave myself away, why I walked into his fire knowing I'd burn, for this, for him. And yet, my mind betrayed me. It didn't think of my son's safety or the cost of his healing. It drifted to a hand on my cheek, a voice that could seduce silence, and the unbearable truth of how it felt to be wanted by someone like Nicolo Greco. I didn't tell Katerina I'd quit. I didn't answer her messages. I couldn't. I wasn't ready to admit what I'd done, or what I'd lost. Dignity didn't come back when you walked away. It stayed behind, trapped in rooms with locked doors and men who knew how to make you beg without ever raising their voice. But the next morning, something shifted. A man followed me home. He wasn't obvious, not at first. Just a shadow across the street, a reflection too still in a shop window. But I saw him again that night, and the next. Always just far enough to question, but close enough to know. I didn't call the police. I knew better. This wasn't random. This was personal. And then, 3 days after I quit, the apartment door was unlocked. I hadn't left it that way. Nothing was taken. Nothing was broken. But Nico's bear was moved, from his pillow to the kitchen counter. A warning, or a message. I didn't know which terrified me more. I packed a bag in 15 minutes, called Katerina, told her nothing, just that we were staying with her for a while. She didn't ask why. She didn't need to. Some silences are full of blood. That night I sat by the window watching the street, waiting for something I couldn't name. I wanted him to come. I wanted him to stay away. I wanted to scream at the space he used to fill. And then, he did. Black car, no headlights, parked across the street like it belonged there. I didn't see him get out. I just felt it. The knock on the door was soft, like a lover, or a threat. I opened it anyway. He stood there like the night had dressed itself in human form. No suit, no tie, just black on black and eyes that burned through me like I was already ash. He didn't speak. Neither did I. He stepped inside like he always had the right, and I let him, because fear has a strange shape when it's mixed with desire. "You've been followed," he said, voice low and razor sharp. "I know." His jaw tightened. "You should have called me. I shouldn't have had to." He looked away for a breath, then back. "I've handled it." "What does that mean?" "It means you're not safe here anymore. Pack your things." "No." He stepped closer. "Julia." "No," I said again, louder, harder. "You don't get to tell me what to do. You don't get to fix this like I'm some mess you made." "You are a mess I can't stop thinking about," he said. And the way he said it, quiet, furious, raw, undid something inside me. He reached for my face, fingers brushing my jaw like he was asking for permission without words. I didn't move. "Come with me," he said. "Please." The word felt foreign on his tongue, like a bruise, like truth, and I should have said no. I should have pushed him away, but my body remembered the way his skin felt against mine, and my heart remembered the way he said my name when he wasn't trying to win. So I nodded, just once. He exhaled like I'd saved him, and I wondered if that was the problem, because if I could save him, maybe I wouldn't survive him. The house wasn't mine. It looked like something stolen from a dream I wouldn't dare have. Walls of silent stone, windows too high to touch, doors that closed without sound. He didn't tell me where we were, just drove through the night like he was escaping something, or maybe trying to keep me from running again. The silence between us was thick, charged, the kind that makes your skin react before your heart knows why. I didn't ask questions. I just watched the road disappear behind us, wondering when I stopped needing answers and started craving only the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. The guest room was larger than my entire apartment, clean, cold, curated, a stranger's version of comfort. I sat on the edge of the bed, gripping the edge of the mattress like I was bracing for impact. He stood in the doorway, his tie undone, his shirt half open. The quiet between us stretched, and then, "You should sleep." "I won't." He didn't move, just watched me with that unbearable calm that always came before he shattered it with one word, one touch. "You don't trust me." "No," I said, and my voice didn't tremble. "I don't trust anyone who thinks protection and control are the same thing." Something in his expression flickered, not anger, not surprise, something quieter, something, "I'm not trying to control you." I laughed once, bitter and small. "Then what is this? You take me from my home? You put me in a place I didn't choose? You decide what I need?" "I saved you," he said, voice low and sharp as a blade. No, I whispered. You claimed me. The silence after that was violent. He stepped into the room, slowly, like he didn't trust his own body near mine, and maybe he was right not to. I don't know how to do this, he said finally, the confession tasting like rust in the air. But I don't want to stop trying. I looked at him, really looked, and what I saw, beneath the perfection, the power, the polished mask, was a man unraveling, and it terrified me more than anything else. He came closer, slower this time, like approaching a wounded animal. His hand hovered near mine, but he didn't touch me. I think about you, he said. Too much. In ways I shouldn't. My breath caught. What ways? Ways that make me forget how dangerous I am. I stood then, chest brushing his. I felt him flinch. Just barely. That tiny reaction made my heart stutter. You scare me, I said, and it was the most honest thing I'd given him. Good, he breathed. I scare myself too. He reached for me. Not rushed, not rough, just fingertips on my jaw, the faintest touch. Like asking without asking. I didn't move away. Couldn't. I tilted my head. Just enough. Then he kissed me. Not like the first time. Not transactional. Not because he'd paid or I'd allowed. This kiss wasn't a contract. It was a confession. His mouth moved against mine like he was trying to memorize it. Like he didn't trust there'd be a second chance. And I kissed him back like I hated myself for wanting it. For needing the way he made the world disappear when his hands found my hips and pulled me closer. We didn't undress like lovers. We peeled each other open like sinners. His lips traced the curve of my shoulder, the hollow of my throat, branding me in silence. My fingers slid beneath his shirt, felt the tension wound tight beneath his skin, the violence sleeping just under the surface. But he never hurt me, not even close. He held me like he didn't know how to hold anything gently, and was trying, desperately, to learn. The bed caught us, but didn't soften the fall. He whispered things against my skin that didn't make sense. Things in Italian, low and rough and reverent. I didn't ask what they meant. Some truths are more beautiful when you don't translate them. And when it ended, when we lay tangled in heat and breath and the kind of silence that only exists between two people who've just burned something sacred, he didn't speak. He just watched me, like I was still the storm and he hadn't survived it yet. I turned my head, eyes tracing the ceiling. I don't want your money, I said. I know. I don't want your protection. Then why are you still here? Because I didn't know where else I belonged anymore. Because leaving him felt like bleeding. But I didn't say that. I closed my eyes instead and let the weight of him beside me press into my bones like a promise he didn't know how to keep. I woke before him, and for a moment I couldn't remember where I was. The room held the scent of him, warm spice, something sharp and masculine that clung to the sheets like a second skin. My body ached in ways I wasn't prepared to name. Not from pain, but from the weight of being touched like I meant something, like I wasn't just a body, but a breaking point he had been too afraid to cross until last night. I sat up slowly, the silk sheet falling from my chest, my breath catching as I looked down at him. Niccolò, sprawled beside me in perfect ruin. One arm flung over his head, his mouth slightly parted, hair mussed in a way that made him look almost human, almost gentle. But I knew better. He wasn't soft, he wasn't safe. He was a storm pretending to sleep, and I was the woman foolish enough to lie in its center. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him, my bare feet silent against the cold floor. My clothes were scattered in a path of decisions I couldn't take back. I gathered them like confessions and dressed without looking in the mirror. I didn't need to see myself to know the girl in the reflection wasn't the same one who arrived here. In the hallway, silence wrapped around me like velvet. Too thick, too still. I passed framed photographs of nothing. Abstracts, curated emptiness, the kind of beauty meant to impress but never touch. I wondered if that was what I had become to him. An aesthetic, a disruption, a thing he wanted to frame without admitting why. When I reached the front door, it was locked. Of course it was. I turned slowly and found him leaning against the wall, arms crossed, bare chest carved in shadow. His voice was low, scratchy from sleep. Going somewhere? I thought I'd spare you the awkward goodbye. He pushed off the wall with that lazy elegance that made danger look desirable. I didn't ask you to leave. I didn't ask you to follow me. I shot back, sharper than I intended. He stepped closer. Not enough to touch, but enough to make every nerve in my body remember the shape of his hands. You think last night was about control? I said nothing. You're wrong, he said. Quieter now, more dangerous. Last night was surrender. Mine. I laughed. A soft, bitter thing. You don't get to romanticize what we both know was a mistake. He tilted his head, studied me like I was a language he was still learning. Is that what you think? I think you don't know what to do with something you can't own. His eyes darkened. And you think I haven't already paid for that? My throat tightened. You're still here, he said. Not because I locked the door, but because something in you wants to stay. No, I whispered. I stayed because I didn't know how to walk away without falling. Then fall, he said, stepping closer, his voice a slow burn. Fall all the way, but don't pretend you're not already halfway gone. I backed up until I hit the door. He didn't touch me. He didn't have to. His presence was pressure, warm and maddening and too much. I can't be yours, I said. I won't survive it. His expression didn't change, but something in his gaze softened. You already survived worse. I shook my head. This is different, because you want it, he said. And wanting me scares you more than needing me ever did. Silence fell between us like a final thread, trembling. I could hear his breath, could feel mine catching on the edge of something unsaid. Then he spoke, barely above a whisper. Let me prove I can be more than what I've been. And if you can't? I asked. He stepped forward, gently took my hand, his thumb brushing the inside of my wrist like a vow. Then you'll leave, and this time, I won't stop you. I looked at our hands, at the way he held me like I was the last real thing he could touch without turning it to ash, and I didn't pull away. Not yet. But I also didn't stay. I just stood there, suspended in that breathless space between fear and forgiveness, wondering if maybe, for once, he wasn't the only one with something to prove. I didn't leave that morning. I told myself it was because the rain started early, thick and heavy against the windows like the sky had finally decided to weep for me. But it wasn't the rain. It was him, still asleep, or pretending to be, his body sprawled across the bed I'd just escaped, like he had all the time in the world to wait for me to make the next mistake. I moved through his home like a ghost, barefoot, cautious, surrounded by silence so absolute it felt curated. No music, no clocks, no ticking reminders of real life, just space, too much of it, rooms without warmth, beauty without meaning. I made coffee I didn't drink, sat in a chair I didn't belong to, looked out a window I couldn't open, and the weight of it, of him, pressed against my skin like heat you couldn't escape. By the time he appeared, dressed in black again, clean and composed, it was late enough to pretend the night before hadn't happened. I thought he'd try. I thought he'd say something slick, something safe. But when his eyes found mine across the room, they didn't hold control. They held hunger, and regret, and something else I didn't want to name. You didn't leave, he said. No, I replied. But I didn't stay either. He walked toward me slowly, hands in his pockets, like he was trying not to spook whatever fragile thing I'd become. You've never been a woman who just stays, Julia. And you've never been a man who lets anyone go. He smiled, but there was no amusement in it. Touché. I stood, not to meet him, just to stop feeling small. What now? I asked. Do I become your kept secret? Your favorite possession? His jaw tensed. Don't do that. Do what? Act like you're not already more dangerous to me than I've ever been to you? I laughed, breathless. Is that your way of saying you're in trouble? He stepped close enough to touch if I tilted an inch. No, it's my way of saying I'm in hell. I didn't move, didn't blink. Then maybe you should stop dragging me into it. His hand lifted, fingers brushing my cheek, featherlight. I'm trying to pull you out. You don't know how, I whispered. Teach me. The words hit harder than they should have, because part of me believed him, the part that remembered his hands the night before, how they trembled when they held me like I was something precious instead of something purchased. I have a son, I said. That's not something you can protect with money and shadows. He's not a weakness you can weaponize. I would never hurt him. You already have. You touched his mother. His hand dropped. I walked past him, needing space, needing clarity, but the walls closed in with every step. And when I turned around, he was watching me with that same unbearable stillness, like if he moved too fast, I'd vanish. I'm not asking for your heart, he said. I just want a chance to deserve it. My laugh this time was softer, sadder. You don't get to ask for that after buying my body. I paid for a night, he said, voice like gravel, but I've been haunted ever since. My breath caught. He stepped forward again, slower, calmer. I see you, Julia. All of you. Not just what you gave me that night. Not just the woman who walks into rooms like she's already planning the exit. I see the mother who would bleed for her son, the girl who's never been held without expectation, the fire that keeps trying to burn itself out. I blinked back the sting behind my eyes. Words are easy. Then give me something harder. Silence. Then, gently, he asked, Can I see him? It landed like lightning. Pure, blinding. Unexpected. I shook my head. No, I don't want to confuse him, he said, or replace what he's lost. I just want to know the boy who made you fight so hard. The way he said it, quiet, reverent, aching, it didn't sound like manipulation. It sounded like need. Still, I didn't answer, because I didn't know if I was more afraid of what Nicolo would do to Nico, or what Nico would do to Nicolo. I didn't sleep, not because I was afraid, though maybe I should have been, but because everything felt too quiet, too heavy. The weight of his words kept echoing through my skin, as if they'd been etched into bone. Can I see him? I hadn't expected that. Not from him, not from the man who once offered me 100,000 euros for a night, then tried to buy silence with a kiss. But the way he said it, with something raw and unfamiliar in his voice, it slipped under my ribs and settled there, pulsing. Nicolo didn't beg. He commanded. He didn't ask for doors to open. He took them off the hinges. And yet, that night, he asked. I watched him from the bedroom door, his silhouette against the city lights. He was sitting alone, one hand wrapped around a glass he hadn't touched, the other pressed to his mouth like he was holding something back, something violent or tender or both. He didn't know I was there. Or maybe he did, and he didn't care. His shoulders moved slightly, not with tension, but with restraint. It was the stillness of someone used to chaos, struggling not to create more. I stepped closer, the floor cold beneath my feet. He didn't look up. He's not a tool, I said softly. I know. He's not a second chance at anything. His fingers tightened around the glass. I know that too. I stood behind him, close enough to feel the heat of his back through his shirt, but I didn't touch him. I wasn't sure who would break first. Why him? I asked. You don't know him. You don't even know if you're capable of being around someone like him. He turned then slowly and looked up at me, not like a man asking for mercy, but like one standing on the edge of something holy and hoping he wouldn't ruin it. Because he's a part of you, he said, and I'm trying to understand what it means to want something that isn't mine. I didn't know what to say. The truth didn't feel safe anymore, and lies tasted wrong in my mouth when I looked at him like this, undressed not by desire, but by vulnerability. So I said nothing. I just walked past him, sat on the other end of the couch, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around myself. He's been asking questions, I whispered, about men, about fathers, about why his looks don't match mine, about why I cry when I think he's asleep. Nicolo's breath caught. I've never lied to him, but I've also never told him that the only man who ever made me feel seen is also the one who made me question everything I am. He moved closer, slowly, like he didn't want to startle me, or maybe like he didn't trust himself. Let me meet him, just once. No promises, no introductions, no expectations, just let me see him. I stared at my hands. They didn't look like hands built for softness anymore. Not after all the nights I'd spent gripping reality by the throat. If he asks who you are, I'll say I'm nobody. A pause. And if he looks at you the way he used to look at his father? Nicolo didn't answer. He just stared into the space between us, jaw tight, eyes darker than I'd ever seen them. I don't know how to do this, I admitted. I'm tired of pretending I do. You don't have to pretend with me. That's the problem, I said, standing. With you, everything is real. And I don't know how to survive real. He followed me to the window, stopped just behind me. Then let me show you how. I turned, breath caught in my throat. Why now? Because I'm running out of excuses to be the man I used to be. And there it was again, that ache between us, old and new and growing teeth. He reached for my wrist, held it gently, pulse to pulse. Let me be near what matters to you, even if I'm never allowed to call it mine. I should have said no, for his sake, for mine, but I didn't, because some wounds need to be seen before they can heal, and he had just asked to look straight into mine. The hospital lights always felt too bright, sterile and unforgiving, like truth. They flickered across the tiles and over the worn lines of my face, erasing softness, revealing every shadow I thought I'd hidden. Nico was still asleep when I arrived. His breathing was steady, rhythmic, the kind of sound that both calms and haunts. A child's breath shouldn't feel like a countdown, but it does when you've watched doctors read charts with eyes too quiet and voices too gentle. I sat beside him and pressed my forehead to the back of his hand, willing him to feel how hard I was trying, how much I'd already bled in silence to keep him in a world that demanded more than I had left. Then I felt it, that subtle shift, the sense of being watched, not by a stranger, but by something known, something unavoidable. I didn't have to look to know it was him. I could feel Nicolo the way you feel the moment before a storm breaks, charged, inevitable, quiet, only on the surface. He didn't come closer. He stood at the doorway, one hand in the pocket of a coat he never wore for warmth. The other clutched a small white bag, folded once at the top like a peace offering. I didn't move. I couldn't. If I stood, I'd have to face the look in his eyes. If I spoke, I might shatter the fragile hush that kept this moment from becoming too real. He stepped inside with the kind of silence only men like him mastered. Purposeful, heavy. He set the bag on the windowsill, careful, like it might break. "Books," he said. His voice didn't carry. It seeped, low and unsure. I didn't know what he liked, so I brought one of everything. I nodded, eyes still on Nico. "He's 6. He likes dinosaurs and things that glow in the dark." Nicolo's breath caught, soft but sharp. Noted. He didn't sit. He hovered, as if the chair beside us might reject him. Or he didn't trust himself to stay if he touched something too close. After a while, I spoke again. "You don't have to do this. I know. You're not obligated. I know that too. Then why are you here?" His pause was long, measured. "Because I want to know who I am when I'm not taking things apart." I looked at him then, really looked, and what I saw wasn't power or elegance. It was ache, unshaped, unspoken. It wore the face of a man who had never been allowed to want without owning, who didn't understand the difference between desire and devotion until now. He knelt beside the bed, one hand resting lightly on the frame, careful not to touch Nico, but close enough to feel his warmth. "He looks like you," he whispered. "No," I replied. "He looks like his father, but he listens like me. Quiet. Too much." Nicolo nodded once. I envy him. That word, envy, on his tongue felt like a foreign language. "Why?" "Because you would burn the world for him." He looked up at me, eyes dark and unguarded. "And I don't know what it feels like to be worth that kind of fire." My throat closed. My fingers curled tighter around Nico's hand. I didn't know how to hold that kind of vulnerability. Not from him. Not from anyone. He stood then, slow, deliberate, as if the act cost him something. I expected him to leave, to retreat the way he always did when he got too close to the edges. But instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out something small, a folded piece of paper. He placed it on the table beside the bed, next to Nico's toy car and the half-eaten cookie from breakfast. "What is that?" I asked. "Nothing important," he said. "Just a number, in case something happens and you need someone who doesn't ask questions before acting." I stared at him. "I thought you didn't want to be involved." "I don't want to be forgiven," he said, "but I won't be absent." And before I could respond, before I could decide whether to thank him or scream, he turned and walked away. But the ache he left behind didn't move with him. It stayed, wrapped around my chest like a name I hadn't said out loud yet, one I wasn't ready to claim. But part of me, deep and still and quiet, had already started to whisper it in the dark. It started with a feeling, sharp, unplaceable, the way your skin tightens before you realize you're being watched. At first I blamed the hospital lights, the echo of sterile footsteps, the constant reminder that everything I loved was fragile. But it followed me home, the flicker of shadows where there should have been none, the car idling too long across the street, a figure in the corner of my eye that vanished before I could focus. I knew danger. I had slept beside it, kissed it, let it inside me. But this wasn't him. This wasn't Nicolo. This was something else, colder, hungrier, less human. I didn't tell him, not at first. Pride was still a shield I hadn't learned how to put down, and fear, when it crept into your life in whispers, always felt easier to ignore than to name. But one morning, I found Nico's favorite bear moved, just slightly, from his pillow to the windowsill. No one had been home. The window had been locked, but the message was clear. They could get in. They had already been here. And they hadn't taken anything because the thing they wanted most hadn't yet been claimed. I packed our things in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just moved like someone underwater, slow and focused, lungs burning. When I called him, I didn't ask. I told. "I need somewhere safe." His voice didn't hesitate. "I'm already on my way." When the door opened, he didn't speak. He didn't question. He looked at me, really looked, and something in him changed. His hands didn't touch me, but they hovered near, as if he could shield me from whatever I wouldn't say. Giorgio stood behind him, expression unreadable, but I saw the way he scanned the room, the hallway, the street beyond. Something was wrong, and it wasn't only inside me. They moved us to another house, bigger, higher, hidden. Not warm, not welcoming, but secure in the way a fortress is secure. Beautiful only if you forget what it was built to keep out. Nico didn't complain. He never did. He held my hand tighter that night, curled against me like he used to when he was smaller, and the world felt less sharp. I ran my fingers through his hair until his breathing slowed, until mine could match it. I found Nicolo in the next room, leaning against the edge of the window with a glass in his hand and nothing in his eyes. He didn't turn when I entered, just said, "They know." "Who?" He hesitated. "Enemies that were once allies, people who want what they can't have." I stepped closer. "They want you." He shook his head, slow. "They want leverage. And now they think they've found it." He didn't have to say it. I already knew. Me, my son, the only soft things he had let close enough to bleed. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. He turned then, just enough for me to see it, that flicker of guilt behind the fury. "Don't be. You didn't start this." "But I stepped into it," I whispered, "and I stayed." His jaw clenched. "I should have protected you before you ever had to ask." "You did," I said, "in your own way." He set the glass down and came toward me, slow, deliberate, every inch of him tight with something unsaid. When he reached me, he didn't touch. He just breathed, close enough that the air between us felt like static. "They offered me a deal," he said. "Your name, your location, your silence, in exchange for peace." My stomach turned to ice. "And?" He smiled without warmth. "I told them to burn." "You didn't have to." "Yes," he cut in, voice razor thin. "I did, because the moment I considered it, even for a second, I realized I wasn't protecting you. I was choosing myself. Again." I stared at him, the weight of his words sinking deep. "And now?" "Now," he said, voice low and fierce, "I make sure they never touch what's mine again." I didn't flinch at the word. Mine. It didn't sound like ownership. It sounded like vow. He reached for me then, fingertips grazing my wrist, tracing the line of my pulse like it was a promise he hadn't earned but wanted to keep anyway. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he murmured. "I'm not offering it." "Good," he said, leaning closer, his breath against my skin like a confession. "Because I want more than absolution. I want a war." And I knew, in that moment, that whatever came next, he would burn the world before letting anyone take us from him. There's a silence that doesn't feel empty, the kind that sits in your lungs and presses down until even breathing feels like betrayal. That was the silence I woke to. Not peace, not calm, but the kind of stillness that meant something had shifted while I slept, something I wouldn't be able to undo. Nico was still curled beside me, warm and safe for now. His little hand rested on my collarbone like he was anchoring me to the present, as if he knew I was already drifting somewhere else, somewhere darker. I moved carefully, not to wake him. Every step out of that room felt like a decision. I didn't know what I expected, but I didn't expect Katerina, sitting on the edge of the kitchen table, smoking a cigarette with one hand and wiping her face with the other. She looked up, startled, then ashamed, like I'd caught her mid-confession. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice lower than I meant. She stood quickly, too quickly. "I came to see you." God, Julia, I didn't know where else to go. I crossed my arms. "That's not true." She flinched. "Okay, I didn't know if I had the right." "You don't." Silence bloomed again, thick with all the things she wasn't saying. Finally, she exhaled smoke and guilt. "They approached me a week ago, maybe more. I didn't tell them anything, I swear. But you listened." She nodded. "I was scared. Not of them, of him, of what being close to him might cost you. I thought, if they could just get what they wanted, you thought handing them a map to my life would save me?" "No," she whispered. "I thought maybe I could stop watching you drown." I stared at her, remembering all the nights we held each other up with laughter and borrowed courage, and I hated how betrayal could wear the face of love so well. "I forgave you once," I said. "I didn't deserve it then. You don't deserve it now." She didn't cry. Not this time. She just nodded, dropped the cigarette into a glass of untouched wine, and walked past me without asking for a second chance. That, at least, I respected. But the wound she left didn't fade with her footsteps. Later, I found Nicolo outside, hands braced against the railing, wind pressing against his shirt like it wanted to reveal everything he was hiding. He didn't turn when I approached. He just said, "I let her in." I blinked. "What?" "Katerina. She came to me first." I stepped back. "You knew?" "I wanted to see if she'd break." His voice was calm, but his jaw was tight. "I watched her lie to protect you, then watched her almost sell you out to save you. It broke her. I let her leave without knowing which part of herself she'd just lost." My stomach twisted. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed you to choose, to see who still deserved a place beside you." "And you think that's you?" He finally looked at me, eyes raw and unguarded. "I think it could be." If I keep doing the one thing no one ever taught me, which is, stay. The wind caught my hair, tangled it across my face. He didn't brush it away. He just watched it move, like he didn't trust his hands not to make it worse. I'm scared, I admitted, of what you'll do, of who you'll become, of what you've already done. I'm scared too, he said. But I'm not leaving, not again, even if you tell me to. I didn't answer. I just stepped forward, leaned into his chest, let my head rest against the place where his heartbeat used to terrify me. Now it was a rhythm I wasn't sure I could live without. His arms came around me slowly, carefully, like forgiveness. I don't need perfect, I whispered. I need true. I'm trying, he breathed. I know. And for once I let myself believe it, even if only for this moment. He kept his word. That was the first surprise. Not the security outside the gates or the men with clipped speech and sharp eyes stationed at every entrance. Not the new house, carved into a cliffside like it had been grown from stone, the windows so wide they made the sky feel too close. No. What caught me off guard was him, present, focused, not hovering, not demanding, just there, quietly unraveling the myth of who he had always been, one careful breath at a time. I didn't know what to do with a man like that. A man who held his power with restraint, who gave without asking first what he'd get in return. The days bled into one another slowly, like honey down glass. Nico adjusted quickly, as children do when given clean sheets and chocolate milk. He liked the way the floor heated under his bare feet, the endless hallway that echoed back his laughter, the view that looked like it had been painted just for him. I watched from a distance, always waiting for the moment the world would remember we weren't meant to be this safe. And then it came. Late one night, Nico coughed hard enough to wake the house. He whimpered in his sleep, and I was at his side in seconds, palm to his forehead. Cold sweat slicked along his hairline. He stirred, eyes glassy. "Mama, it hurts." Just 3 words, but they cut cleaner than any blade. I didn't scream. I didn't panic. I moved fast, urgent. But when I reached the door, Niccolo was already there, barefoot, shirt half-buttoned, phone in hand. "He's burning up," I said, voice sharp with the kind of fear that doesn't make noise until it breaks. "I'm calling the team." "What team?" He didn't answer, just walked away, issuing commands I couldn't hear but felt in the shift of air around me. Within 15 minutes, a helicopter was landing on the back terrace. I didn't ask how. I didn't care. I held Nico in my arms as they loaded him onto a stretcher. And for once, I didn't argue when Niccolo took my hand and pulled me into the cabin after them. We flew through night and storm, sky splitting in flashes that lit up the inside of the aircraft like confessions. He didn't let go of me, not once. His thumb pressed into the back of my hand like he was grounding us both. When we landed, the hospital wasn't public. It wasn't even visible from the street. High glass walls, soft lights. Doctors who didn't hesitate. A room ready before we entered. I sat beside Nico, helpless, hollow, and Niccolo stood behind me like a sentinel, quiet and still. "He'll be okay," he said. "You don't know that." He exhaled slowly. "No, but I'll make sure everything that can be done is done." I didn't thank him. I couldn't. There are moments when gratitude feels too small, too useless. Instead, I stood, walked to the hallway, and pressed my back to the wall like it could hold me upright. My knees were soft, my throat raw. I didn't cry. I just stared at nothing. A moment passed, then another, and then he was there. "I saw you once," he said quietly, "before the office, before I knew your name." I looked at him. He continued, "You were in line at a pharmacy, wearing that gray coat with the frayed collar. You looked tired, angry, alive." I swallowed. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I didn't know then what you'd become to me. But I remember thinking, she's surviving some." I didn't respond. My voice wasn't ready to betray me. He stepped closer, his hand brushing mine, not grabbing, not owning, just there. "I've destroyed a lot of things in my life," he whispered, "but I've never wanted to save something until you." And for the first time, I let myself lean into him, just slightly, just enough. His hand rose to the back of my neck, fingers threading through my hair with reverence. No promises, no lies, just breath shared between people who had forgotten how to need, and were slowly learning again. The days passed like breath I couldn't hold. Nico was stable, his fever broken, but there was a weight in the air that hadn't lifted. Something invisible but heavy, like waiting for the second half of a sentence you already knew would break you. I spent most hours at his bedside, fingers curled in his, whispering stories I could barely finish. His eyes fluttered open sometimes, and when they did, he smiled, sleepy, trusting, so alive it ached to look at him. He didn't know what was happening around him. He didn't know the price that had been paid to keep his world soft. I knew. and so did Nicolo. He never stayed long in the room. He came and went like a shadow, brief, tense, always watching more than speaking. I wanted to ask what he was keeping from me. I wanted to demand the full truth, but I was afraid of what it would cost to hear it. So I waited, and the waiting clawed at the inside of my ribs like guilt with too many names. It was Giorgio who told me first. I found him in the hallway, late at night, leaning against the wall like a man who didn't trust even his own stillness. He didn't look at me when he spoke. "There's something you should know." I didn't answer, just waited. They came to him again, not just with threats, with offers. My pulse stilled. "They want you," he said. "But it's not just about leverage anymore. It's blood." "What?" Giorgio turned to me, his face carved in stone. "Your grandfather, the one your mother never spoke of. He was part of a rival family once. High enough that your name still holds weight? Especially your son's." I couldn't breathe. "What does that mean?" "It means you weren't just an accident in this story. You were always going to matter to someone dangerous, and now they've realized what you are." My knees nearly gave out. "He knew?" Giorgio nodded slowly. "He didn't want you to carry that weight. He planned to keep it buried, until they tried to use it against him. And now, he's preparing to burn every bridge he ever built, every deal, every alliance. He's cutting ties so they can't touch you, so they can't touch Nico." The floor shifted beneath me. "He'll destroy everything. Yes, for us. Yes." I found him later, alone in the garden behind the hospital. Night clung to him like it belonged there. His sleeves were rolled, tie loosened, hands deep in his pockets like he needed somewhere to bury the parts of himself that were unraveling. "You lied to me," I said quietly. He didn't turn. "I didn't want you to see yourself through their eyes. I needed to see myself through yours." His silence was worse than anger, worse than denial. "I'm not a legacy," I whispered. "I'm not leverage." "No," he said, finally looking at me. "Your salvation." My breath caught. He stepped closer, slower this time, like he didn't trust himself not to fall apart mid-step. "They don't want you because of who you are, Julia. They want you because of what you could turn into. A symbol, a shift in power, a risk. And you?" He reached for me then, hand cupping the side of my neck, thumb tracing just under my jaw. "I want you because you look at me like I'm already better than I am." And that terrified. I leaned into his touch, eyes closing. "I didn't ask for any of this. I know. I was just trying to keep my son alive. And I," he said, breath shaking, "was just trying to figure out if I could still be a man around something so pure." We stood there, between worlds, his past and my blood, his choices and my consequences. And still, in that quiet, his hand didn't leave me. He didn't kiss me. He didn't promise anything. He just stayed. And in that stillness, I understood something cruel and beautiful. Sometimes staying is the bravest thing a man like him can do. I didn't want to fall asleep, but my body betrayed me. Hours slipped past in fragments of blurred machines and soft monitors, the lull of Nico's steady breath pulling me under like a lullaby. When I opened my eyes, it wasn't daylight that greeted me. It was her, Katerina, sitting in the corner like a shadow stitched to the room, her eyes rimmed in exhaustion, her lips pressed into something too still to be remorse. I didn't speak. Neither did she. The silence between us wasn't forgiveness. It was something colder, more final. She stood slowly, walked toward me like she knew her time was short. She knelt beside the chair, her fingers brushing the edge of the blanket on my lap. "I didn't come to be forgiven," she said. "Good. I came to tell you the rest." I looked at her then, really looked. She was thinner, pale. Her hands trembled like she hadn't slept in days. Guilt makes the strongest women collapse in the quiet. "I told them where you were going," she said. "Not because I wanted to hurt you, but because I thought he already had." My breath caught, sharp and involuntary. "I thought if I helped them, if I handed you over, they'd leave you and Nico alone, that maybe the rest of your life wouldn't get written in blood. And now? They lied," she whispered. "They never wanted peace. They wanted possession. Of course they did." She reached into her coat, pulled out a small flash drive and placed it in my hand. "Everything. Names, money, movement. You give this to him, and he burns the rest." I stared at it, the weight of it sudden and real. "I won't see you again," she said. "Probably not." She stood, looked at Nico once, longer than she should have, then left. I didn't follow her. I couldn't. When I found Nicolo, he was in the corridor, speaking to Giorgio in clipped Italian I wasn't meant to understand. But I felt the tension in the air, thick like thunder. He turned the moment he saw me. "What's wrong?" I didn't answer, just handed him the flash drive. He held it like a live wire. "Where did you get this?" "Katerina." His jaw clenched. "She's playing both sides." She's done, I said softly. She knows it. He looked at the drive again. This changes everything. I know. He ran a hand down his face, slow and rough, like he was trying to wipe off the weight of his name. If I do this, if I use this, we can't go back. There won't be a deal. There won't be a truce. There will only be ruin. I stepped closer, placed my hand against his chest, felt the war beneath his skin, then burn it all. His eyes met mine, something dark and sacred flickering behind them. You understand what you're asking. I'm not asking, I said. I'm standing beside you when it falls. The kiss he gave me then wasn't soft. It wasn't sweet. It was survival. Teeth, breath, hands tangled in hair and fear and need. His mouth devoured the silence between us, and I let him. Because love like this wasn't ever meant to be quiet. It was meant to shake walls. He pulled back just enough to whisper against my lips. I'll keep you safe. No, I said. We'll keep each other safe. He nodded once, then turned to Giorgio. Make the call. The message was sent. The war had begun. The rain started again that night, soft at first, like a warning whispered against glass. I sat beside Nico's bed, watching the sky fracture in long, silvery veins, my fingers tracing the curve of his arm, just to remind myself he was real, still warm, still mine. His face was peaceful, but his body had thinned, and in the hollow of his cheeks I saw the war we'd already fought, the one we were still fighting. He didn't know what Nicolo had done to keep him safe, what he'd broken, what he'd chosen to become. He only knew the man brought him books and let him win at cards and sat beside him like he'd always belonged there. Children have a way of knowing only what they need, and what Nico needed, desperately, was for the world to stop trembling around him. But it didn't. It never really does. The door creaked open behind me. I didn't turn. I didn't have to. I heard from Giorgio, Nicolo said. His voice had shifted lately. It carried something heavier now, something stripped down. They're not going to wait. I looked down at my son. And we can't run. No. I stood slowly, the ache in my spine sharp, familiar. So what happens now? I take it to them. Everything. He stepped closer, each word measured, deliberate. I make sure the choice I made doesn't land on your shoulders. My laugh was bitter, low. It already has. He moved to stand beside me, close but not touching, and for once I wanted him to. I wanted to feel the edge of him, the certainty, the fire, but I stayed still. I've spent my life punishing people who took from me, he murmured, and now, all I want is to give something back. I turned, finally. His eyes were darker than usual, not with anger, with resolve, with mourning for something still breathing. You can't promise we'll be safe. No, he said, but I can promise they won't be. I reached up, fingertips grazing the line of his jaw. He caught my wrist, gently, and pressed a kiss to the inside of it like he was sealing something sacred there. You don't have to be a monster to protect us, I said. He held my gaze. But I do have to become one to end this. And he would. I saw it in his stillness, the kind of quiet that lives just before a storm flattens a city. He'd made peace with who he needed to be. I hadn't. Not yet. But I was standing at the edge of it, learning. When the call came, short, coded, final, he didn't say goodbye. He just looked at me like he was memorizing my face, like he didn't trust time to give him another chance. And then, he left. The storm outside grew teeth, the kind that made the building groan and the wind feel like breath from something wild. I curled up beside Nico, whispering lullabies that cracked around the edges, singing until my throat dried, until I couldn't hear anything over the sound of my own pulse. It was hours before I heard the door again. I didn't expect him back so soon. I didn't expect the blood. His steps were uneven, his shirt soaked, and when I ran to him, he caught me just before he fell. His hands were cold, his breathing ragged, but his eyes, they still burned. It's done, he rasped. I pressed my palm to his side, felt the warmth of what he'd lost seeping into my skin. You're hurt. I had to make sure, he said, voice thinned by pain, that they believed me. Sit down. No, he whispered. Not yet. I helped him to the couch, shaking, furious, terrified. He leaned back, eyes half closed, a faint smirk pulling at his lips. You should see the other guy, he muttered. I'm going to kill you, I breathed. He smiled wider. Too late. I held his face in my hand, desperate to keep him conscious. Don't do that. Don't joke. Not now. His eyes fluttered open. If I don't laugh, I'll fall apart. I've got you, I whispered. So fall. And he did. Not into darkness, into me. And I caught every piece. The blood on my hands wouldn't come off. Not because I didn't scrub hard enough, but because some stains aren't skin deep. They settle into memory, into the shape of your breath, into the way your heart moves when you think no one is watching. I sat in the bathroom after they took him away. 4 men, silent, swift, trained to carry the weight I couldn't. They didn't ask if I wanted to go with them. They knew I wouldn't leave Nico. They didn't meet my eyes. They didn't need to. My grief clung to me like perfume, sweet, heavy, lingering. The sink was full of pink water. My nails were chipped, the sleeves of my sweater damp and ruined. I had stopped shaking, but only on the outside. Inside, everything still trembled. He said it was done, but nothing felt finished, only suspended. I walked back to Nico's room and found it empty. He'd been taken for another scan, they said. Routine, just precaution. I nodded, but the panic still bloomed inside me, quiet and uncontrollable. I hated how used to waiting I had become, for answers, for results, for men like Nicolo to come back from the dark they'd thrown themselves into. I didn't sit. I couldn't. Instead, I wandered the sterile hallways, passing strangers who didn't see me, who didn't know I'd held a man's face in my hands just hours before, and watched him bleed for a future I wasn't sure we'd earned. I passed the chapel too, small, empty. A cross on the wall that looked more like surrender than salvation. I stepped inside anyway. There's something about silence in sacred places. It feels louder, like it's listening. I sat in the last pew, hands clenched together in my lap, knuckles white. I don't know what I'm supposed to pray for, I whispered. No one answered. I've asked for healing, for protection, for forgiveness, but not for me, not once. And maybe that's why it never came. Still, nothing. I closed my eyes, let the quiet hold me. And then, a voice, low, familiar, frayed at the edges. Julia. I turned. He was there, alive, barely. Nicolo leaned against the doorframe, skin pale, lips bruised, one side of his shirt dark with blood they hadn't bothered to wash away. You're supposed to be in bed, I said, rising too quickly. He smiled, and it almost broke me. I've never been good at doing what I'm supposed to. I reached him in 3 steps, pressing my hands to his chest, his face needing proof. You're real. I told you, he said, eyes locking onto mine. I don't leave. You almost did, but I didn't. And then we were holding each other, not in desperation, but in something quieter, something earned. His arms wrapped around me with care, but not caution. He didn't flinch when I pressed against the wound. He just exhaled, a soft sound like surrender. I missed you, I whispered into his collarbone. I was gone for 5 hours, and I felt every second. He pulled back just enough to see me, then let me stay longer this time. I nodded, just once. The kiss was slow, aching, reverent. His lips tasted of salt and breath and promises we didn't say aloud. His fingers wove through my hair like he'd done it 1,000 times in dreams and was afraid it might disappear. He deepened the kiss, not to take, but to give, and I let him. Because this was no longer about need. It was about choosing what was left after everything else had burned. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. I'm not who I was. No, I breathed. You're becoming. And you? I smiled, tears finally spilling. I'm still burning. His thumb caught one. Then we'll burn together. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the fire. Morning found us with our hands still laced. The world hushed around our bodies like it finally understood what we needed. The chapel was empty now, the candles long burned out, but the quiet remained, and I wasn't ready to move. His pulse had steadied under my palm, that storm-beat rhythm that used to terrify me, now a tether. I kept my eyes closed a little longer than necessary, afraid the light would undo the softness between us, afraid we would go back to being edges instead of something whole. But eventually, I spoke. You shouldn't have come. He didn't answer immediately. His fingers squeezed mine, slow, deliberate, like his silence was the answer. I opened my eyes. You almost died. He looked at me like he already had, and I was the only thing that brought him back. But I didn't. You're still bleeding. He smiled faintly. You make it sound romantic. I'm not trying to. I shifted to face him fully. I'm trying to remind you you're not invincible. You're flesh and bone and consequence. And yours, he murmured. That part scares me more than the bleeding. It should have been a line, a sin dressed in words, but it wasn't. It was real, bare, and I let it sink into my skin without flinching, then stopped proving it like a man who has nothing to lose. He inhaled, slow and sharp, like he didn't know how to answer without giving too much away. I've already lost too much. I'm not losing you. You don't have to keep choosing destruction just to keep me close. I'm not, he said, eyes darkening. I'm choosing you to end the destruction. Something in me broke at that, quietly, like glass under pressure, not from pain, from the impossible weight of being loved by someone who had never known how to love safely. I reached up, touched his face with both hands, felt the stubble against my palms, the heat of his breath. Then choose us, fully, not as a shield, not as your escape, as your beginning. He nodded, but it wasn't agreement. It was surrender. Later that morning, we returned to Nico's room. He was awake, drowsy but alert, and when he saw Nicolo, his eyes lit up with something innocent and devastating. Joy. He didn't know what this man had done for him. Didn't know the blood, the sacrifice, the war he'd walked through just to sit at the edge of this hospital bed. But children don't need to understand the fire to recognize warmth. Hey, Nico said, voice scratchy but smiling. Hey, kid, Nicolo replied, pulling the chair close. You scared us. You should have seen the other guy. Nico grinned weakly. Nicolo's laugh cracked the air open. I like him, he said to me without looking away. I sat beside them, my hand brushing Nico's hair, my knee touching Nicolo's thigh. The three of us in that small room, tangled in a silence that didn't feel heavy anymore. Just true. He's going to be okay, I whispered. I know, Nicolo said, his voice steady, because now I'll make sure of it. And for the first time, I believed him without needing to ask how. He didn't tell me he was leaving. I woke up in a room where his warmth still lingered in the folds of the sheets. The pillow barely cooled from where his head had rested. The window was cracked open, and the morning smelled like coming rain, the kind that doesn't announce itself with thunder, but with silence. That breathless hush before everything changes. I touched the side of the bed where he should have been and felt something too close to panic coil beneath my ribs. A note, folded once, resting on the nightstand like it had been placed with care, like it hurt to leave it there. Gone to finish what I started. I'll come back only if I can stay. N. There was no address, no number, just that promise, wrapped in uncertainty and blood and the kind of devotion that doesn't ask permission. I closed my eyes, held the paper against my chest, and tried to slow the rhythm of my heart, but it moved faster, louder, filling the room with a sound only I could hear. His name, over and over again, like a prayer I wasn't ready to lose. The day stretched without him. I stayed by Nico's side, answering soft questions about cartoons and ice cream and why grown-ups looked sad when they thought no one was watching. I smiled. I nodded. I told him everything was okay because some lies are allowed when they keep a child's world soft. But when the sun began to fall, painting the floor in ribbons of gold and ache, I knew something wasn't right. Giorgio arrived just after dusk. He didn't speak at first, just stood in the doorway with a shadowed look and hands that twitched once before stilling. Where is he? I asked. He did what he said he would. That's not an answer. He exhaled like it hurt. He dismantled everything, every connection, every deal, every thread of power that kept the walls up around him. I rose, breath snagging. Why? Because the last thing he wanted was to raise a family behind glass. The word hit hard. Family, like something I'd been too afraid to hope for. I moved closer. And now? He hasn't come back, Giorgio said quietly. Not yet. My knees went weak. Is he alive? I don't know. That was worse than no. I stepped past him, not knowing where I was going, only that I couldn't stay still. My body didn't know how to be patient with this kind of ache. I went to the chapel again, empty now, quiet in that oppressive way that made everything inside me louder. I sat in the same pew, but this time, I didn't pray. I wrote his name, again and again on the edge of a napkin pulled from my coat pocket. It wasn't poetry, it wasn't power, it was survival. As if by writing it, I could summon him back from whatever place he'd disappeared into. The doors behind me creaked open, and I didn't turn, because I didn't believe it yet. But then I heard the voice, low, worn, breaking. I told you I'd come back. I stood slowly, turned. He was there, bruised, blood on his collar, but breathing. Still him, still mine. I walked to him without a word. He met me halfway, and when our hands found each other, I didn't ask what he'd done. I only asked, is it over? He nodded once. For them. For us. It's just beginning. Then he kissed me. And it wasn't about desperation. It was about finally choosing peace. I never knew the sound of safety until it echoed in the space between our bodies. The way he said my name after silence, after blood, after choosing to come back with hands no longer clenched in war. I watched him sleep the next morning, not because I was afraid he would leave again, but because I still didn't know how to live in a world where he stayed. He looked different in the quiet. Not softer, not smaller, just real. Real in a way that made my chest ache, in a way that reminded me I wasn't dreaming. His breath was steady, his lips parted slightly, as if even in sleep he was waiting to speak something only I would hear. I traced the line of his jaw with my eyes. I didn't dare touch. Not yet. I didn't want to wake him with trembling. Nico was playing in the courtyard when I stepped outside, chasing light with arms wide open. The garden was blooming, stubborn against the end of autumn. Yellow and white and soft red petals stretching toward sun like they still believed in warmth. I watched my son move through the grass barefoot, laughing, fearless. He didn't know what his mother had done to keep him whole. He didn't know what Nicolo had destroyed so that this could exist. I felt him before I heard him, the way the air shifted behind me, the gravity that came with his presence now more familiar than my own breath. He doesn't know, Nicolo said. No, I replied, eyes still on Nico. And he won't. His hand came to rest gently on my back, low and firm, a reminder, a promise. You're different, he said. I feel different. What changed? You came back. He exhaled, soft and rough. I wanted to say it. When I walked through that door, I wanted to fall to my knees and tell you everything I couldn't say before. Then why didn't you? Because I didn't want to speak too soon. I didn't want the words to mean less than the blood they cost. I turned to face him. His eyes were clearer now. Still dark, still dangerous, but no longer haunted. Say them now. He reached up, touched my cheek, thumb brushing the corner of my mouth. I love you. 3 words, simple, small, but they wrapped around me like heat, like a slow burn I didn't want to end. I closed my eyes. I know. His mouth found mine, not with urgency, not with hunger, but with reverence. And this time, I kissed him back like I believed it. Later, we sat on the grass with Nico between us, the sun dipping low, painting everything gold. He handed us flowers, little bruised daisies and crooked stems, as if offering pieces of a world we'd finally earned. Nicolo took one, twirled it between his fingers. I've never held something so fragile. I smiled. And I want to keep it alive. We didn't speak after that. We didn't need to. And for the first time, the silence wasn't a warning. It was peace. I didn't know it was possible to feel safe and exposed at the same time, like standing in sunlight with skin still tender from past storms. There was warmth now, subtle, steady, but every step I took beside him still felt like uncharted land, not because I feared the fall, but because I had finally started believing in the landing. Nicolo walked slightly behind me that morning, his hand low on my back, never pushing, never pulling, just there, steady, present. The house was quiet, soft with the kind of stillness that only comes after fire. No more men in dark corners, no more whispers through walls, just breath, just us. He watched me pour coffee like it was sacred, like the small things I did meant more to him than the wars he'd won. I caught his gaze and smiled, half sleepy, half unguarded. You're staring. I've never had the luxury of watching someone I love do something ordinary. His voice still curled around me like silk, but it didn't unsettle anymore. It settled. I crossed the room, handed him the mug, our fingers brushing. You're learning, from the best, he murmured, eyes not on the coffee, but on me. Nico's footsteps came barreling down the hallway a moment later, laughter spilling out like he'd forgotten the meaning of fear. He jumped into Nicolo's lap without hesitation, arms wrapped tight around his neck, and I saw it again, what they'd become to each other. No bloodline, no titles, just something deeper, chosen. I made something for you, Nico said proudly, pulling a crumpled piece of paper from behind his back. Nicolo unfolded it carefully. A drawing, 3 figures, holding hands under a crooked sun, stick legs, smiling faces, and one small word scrawled beneath, family. His voice caught before he could speak. He cleared his throat, then kissed the top of Nico's head. It's perfect. I stood by the window while they spoke in hushed tones behind me, watching the day stretch wide, pale and cloudless. The world had stopped spinning out of control. We had slowed it, with blood, with forgiveness, with impossible love, but we were here. And then his arms were around me again, slipping around my waist from behind, his breath warm against my ear. You still haven't given me an answer, he said. I tilted my head back slightly. To what? He kissed the curve of my neck, the question I haven't asked yet. I turned in his arms, hands on his chest, feeling the rhythm that no longer raced. Then asked. He didn't drop to one knee. He didn't need to. Nicolo Greco didn't bend for the world, but he would bend for... I want a life with you, Julia. No shadows, no hiding, just mornings like this, nights like that, and everything in between. Marry me? The silence between his question and my answer was a breath, a heartbeat, a history rewritten. Yes. He didn't smile right away. He just looked at me like I had handed him something fragile and infinite. And then he kissed me like we were already there. Already whole. Already home. Nico whooped from the couch, cheering, clapping, unaware of how much had been buried to build this joy. Later, we sat in the garden, sun on our faces, and for the first time in my life, I didn't wait for the pain to come back. I only waited for forever. The dress wasn't white. It was a shade between dusk and dream, soft and silver, like moonlight caught in silk. I chose it because it didn't pretend to be pure. It didn't ask to be untouched. It shimmered with every step, quiet but certain, like everything I had become. Nico ran ahead of me on the garden path, his laughter echoing through the olive trees, bouquet clutched in both hands like he didn't trust the flowers to hold themselves together. He looked like sunlight, like hope made small and alive. And when he glanced back at me with that knowing little grin, I realized he had always known this day would come. The chapel at the edge of the cliff wasn't grand. It was old stone and open doors, candles flickering in the late afternoon light, windows throwing gold across the pews like blessings. There were no guests, no music, just breath and intention, just him, standing at the front, back straight, hands folded, dressed in something dark and simple. But his eyes, they were everything. When he saw me, he didn't smile right away. He looked at me like the world had finally proven itself worthy, like I had arrived not as a bride, but as an answer. I walked to him slowly, each step deliberate, not fragile, not afraid. My heart didn't pound. It pulsed, steady and warm, like it knew this rhythm now, knew this man, knew the storm we had walked through to find something that didn't need to be tamed to be called love. When I reached him, I didn't speak. Neither did he. We just stood there facing each other, the silence wrapped around us like a vow already spoken. The officiant began, voice low, reverent, the words familiar but newly holy. I barely heard them. I only saw the way his fingers trembled when he reached for mine, how his thumb brushed my knuckle like a question. Even now, even after everything. Julia, he whispered, voice catching in the center of my name. You didn't save me. You made me want to save myself. And if that's not love, I never knew what it was. I didn't cry. My eyes burned, but no tears fell. Because this wasn't pain. It was the release of it. Nicolo, I breathed. You didn't fix me. You looked at every broken part and stayed anyway. You saw all my fire and you didn't run. You walked through it. The rings were simple. Cool metal, no diamonds. Just circles. Endless. When they slid onto our fingers, I felt it. Something invisible but binding. Not like chains. Like gravity. You may kiss, the voice said. And he did. Not like before. Not with desperation, but with reverence. With tenderness. With the knowledge that he never had to prove anything again. We walked out together, hand in hand, into air that smelled like rosemary and sea. Nico ran ahead, scattering petals from his empty bouquet, and when he turned, his eyes full of light, I knew. This was the chapter where nothing needed to be rewritten. This was the beginning of the story I had always been meant to tell. He writes late at night, when the house is quiet, and the only sound is the breath of our sleeping son and the wind through the lemon trees just outside our window. He sits at the edge of the bed, shirt half open, skin golden from the low lamp beside him, a notebook in his lap, pen moving slow, careful, like each word carries the weight of something unspoken. I don't ask what he's writing. I already know. He doesn't write for the world. He writes for the ghosts he buried, for the man he used to be, for the future he never believed he'd hold in his hands. He writes for us, and maybe for himself. I watch him sometimes from the doorway, wrapped in one of his shirts, my hair still damp from a late shower. He doesn't know I'm there, or maybe he does, and he lets me believe he doesn't. The way his jaw moves when he's thinking, the way he pauses between sentences, head tilted, eyes distant, that's the version of him I love most, the one still learning how to live without armor. Tonight, he closes the book slowly, sets the pen down with care, and turns to look at me. His eyes are softer now, still sharp, still the kind of dangerous that makes my breath catch, but there's peace in them, a stillness I once thought he'd never earn. Come here, he says, voice low, hoarse from hours of silence. I move toward him, slow, like a promise unfolding, and when I reach him, he pulls me between his legs, hands sliding up my thighs beneath the hem of his shirt. He kisses my stomach, once, then again, then rests his cheek against it like he's listening for something only he can hear. She's getting stronger, he murmurs. You think it's a girl? He nods against my skin. I know it. You said that last time, I smile. And I was wrong, he says, grinning against me. But this time I'm sure. I run my fingers through his hair, slow, grounding. Are you afraid? Every day. I pause. Of what? that I won't know how to love her gently, that she'll look at me and see all the things I buried, all the things I've done. She'll see you the way I see you, I whisper, whole, forged, fierce, soft where it matters. He exhales, and it shakes a little. His arms tighten around me like he's anchoring us both to the moment. I never thought I'd have this, he says. A home, a wife, a son, a daughter on the way. You fought for it, I reply. You bled for it. I still don't know if I deserve it. Then keep showing up until you believe you do. He lifts his head then, kisses the space between my breasts, my throat, my mouth. Slow, deep, like gratitude, like reverence. We lie back on the bed, tangled together beneath thin sheets, our bodies molded by memory and healing. His hand never leaves my skin. It moves in lazy strokes, mapping me as if he's memorizing the shape of safety. Outside, the wind carries the scent of salt and rosemary. Inside, we breathe in time. And when sleep comes, it's not restless. It's earned. Thank you for staying until the end. Your presence here means more than you know. Every time you like, comment, or share, you breathe new life into this story. You tell the world it matters. And in return, you give me a reason to keep writing. Not just with ink, but with heart, with soul, with the kind of surrender only real stories demand. If this tale touched something inside you, leave a trace, a word, a whisper. Even a simple, "I'm here," tells me I'm not writing into silence. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love for you to join us. It's free. And when you turn on notifications, you'll never miss a heartbeat of what's coming next. And if it's not too much to ask, share this with a friend, with someone who believes in second chances, someone who still aches, still hopes, still wants to believe in love that hurts and heals. In a world that shouts too loud and loves too little, your gesture, small as it seems, can shift something, maybe even save something. So thank you for listening, for feeling, and most of all for being here. You're always welcome.